And I read this one article. I read this article actually on my brother's birthday, and I kept it. And I said, I have to find somebody to talk about the magic of fairy tales with. And I found that guy tonight in the form of Stephen Jonathan Rummelsberg, a friend of Timothy Gordon's. I'm so happy to have met him, and it's going to be a great conversation. But here is the article from the Epoch Times that I read in print, and then I found the digital version. Wisdom and Wonder, The Magic of Fairy Tales, written by Jeff Minnick. In my 1967 edition of The World's Best Fairy Tales, a Reader's Digest anthology, which sits at my elbow as I write these words, former children's librarian Marie Cimino introduces this 800-page collection in this way, quote, "In this world, virtue is always rewarded, evil is always punished, the weak are helped, and the young can be the winner. The fairy tale offers reassurance at the same time that it appeals to the taste for the marvelous." And at the end of this brief essay, Cimino adds this quote about fairy tales, quote, "Listening to them or reading them, children will experience some of the enduring wisdoms of other times, when the sense of wonder was very much alive," end quote. Many adults love fairy tales as well. Visit your local library or bookstore and you'll find dozens of fantasy novels aimed at older readers. Classics ranging from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and John Hood's 2021 Mountain Folk. His tale of the American Revolution, in which the likes of Daniel Boone and George Washington consort with dwarves and sprites. I gotta read that. Wisdom. My Reader's Digest anthology includes, of course, the tale of Cinderella. There are two stepsisters who scorn and mock her, the fairy godmother, the glass slipper, the ball at which the beautiful Cinderella draws the rapt attention of the handsome prince, his search for her when she disappears, and his proposal of marriage when he finds her. And just before the story ends, quote, "Her two sisters threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon for all the ill treatment they had made her undergo. Cinderella embraced them and cried that she forgave them with her whole heart and desired them to always love her." And the last sentence, quote, "Cinderella, who was no less good than she was beautiful, gave her two sisters lodging in the palace, and the very same day matched them with two great lords of the court," end quote. The conventional rendition of Cinderella teaches lessons in modesty, hope, and generosity. As Marie Cimino suggests, the other fairy tales, Chicken Little, The Emperor's New Clothes, Hansel and Gretel, and so many more, also act as primers in virtue and morality. As far as a sense of wonder goes. Moreover, talking animals, elves, wicked witches, and stalwart heroes enliven and expand the imaginations of young children. Whether they are reading fairy tales or hearing them, the minds of the young ones catch fire with these stories. When I tell my preschool grandchildren, quote, my grandchildren, the three Billy Goats gruff, changing my voice for the troll and for each of the goats, they sit enraptured by the performance. Another grandson recently wanted me to read the story of Jack and the Beanstalk to him over and over again, seeing himself in his mind's eye, I am certain, as the intrepid Jack. As we grow older, we may lose this wonderment regarding fairy tales, but not wonder itself. Like physical fitness or intelligence, wonder grows with exercise. The young woman fed a diet of nursery rhymes and fairy tales as a child finds majesty and beauty in a meadow or a human face that others may miss. Fairy tales mutate through time and from place to place. There are many versions of Cinderella, for example, from around the world and from antiquity until now. Some of these are quite strange, and in one Italian rendition, Cinderella is born inside of a gourd, abandoned by her mother, and is beaten and abused by a prince until she appears before him in disguise, and some dark, gruesome tales as well. In her online article, The Most Popular Fairy Tale Stories of All Times, Ariel Zeitlin tells us that Cinderella is first on this list, and by far that there are maybe as many as 1,500 traditional variants of the tale from around the world, including the girl with the rose-red slippers from ancient Egypt and a 9th century AD Chinese version that might explain the story's fascination with small feet. Now, a step too far. But is it possible to modernize and twist the messages, even the plots of the fairy tale, beyond recognition? In her review of the latest version of Cinderella, Why Camilla Cabello's Cinderella Made These 7 Changes to the Fairy Tale, Ashley Lee tells us this is not your mother's fairy tale. Here, Cabello plays a Cinderella who goes to the basement, not as a punishment, but to work as a fashion designer. See, a career woman. Her first paying customer is Prince Robert, a royal who is reluctant to be king. Cinderella's fairy godmother is the non-binary Fab G, who wants to help her go to the royal ball to meet a bunch of rich people who will change your life, end quote. While there, she turns down the prince's proposal. Quote, I have dreams that I have to chase, she says. If it's a choice, I choose me. It's almost like Arya from Game of Thrones with HBO. You know, there's so much wrong with the last season of HBO's Game of Thrones, but Arya and Gendry, they started, many of you probably don't even know what the hell I'm talking about, but whatever. For those of you who do, Arya and Gendry start getting close, and they start getting intimate. And you're like, oh my God, is Arya actually going to find love? This tomboy who always wanted to be an assassin and be on her own, and she had a death list, and she just wanted to kill all the people who ruined her family, which is something that you root for the entirety of the series. But coming up toward the end, you hope that she can move on to something else. And it seemed like they had this really great thing going. And here's Gendry, who's not going to turn her into a barmaid or anything like that, is just like, be with me. Let's be together. And she's all like, no, I'm nobody's lady, blah. I have to go off into the world and slice people's fucking throats. Oh. Like, oh, God. Yeah, denied. Deny yourself the pleasure. Deny. So if it's a choice, I choose me. See, this Cinderella is the one that's going to chase a career until she's 39 and then go to the sperm bank looking for looking for offspring. That's what she's going to do. Meanwhile, back to the thing here. Hold on. Let me get to the last parts here. So they're talking about that. Now, paying homage to tradition. I have a couple of minutes before I have to call up Steven. Writers and film directors, likewise, have the right to do as they please when retelling these treasured tales, but they also have a responsibility to honor the wisdom and morality of the original story. When they create a fairy godmother with a non-binary gender, they have effectively changed the definition of godmother. When Cinderella becomes an egotist, looking out for number one, the writer has eroded the meaning of the story. In her critique of Kay Cannon's Cinderella, a friend asked me, are filmmakers really so out of touch with their audience? Her question later led me to wonder, what if modern audiences prefer a self-centered, career-minded Cinderella to the char girl in the traditional tale? What would that say about us? And then finally, in What Your Kindergartner Needs to Know, a part of the core knowledge program aimed at students in K through 6, editors E.D. Hirsch Jr. and John Holdren include poems, stories, and fairy tales that should be commonly known by children. The idea behind the educational program is that all young people who will one day become adults share these poems and stories central to our culture, thereby building bridges between individuals within communities. Familiarity with Jack and Jill, The Little Boy Blue, The Little Red Hen, and The Ugly Duckling creates an intersection of shared knowledge and experience among our citizens. In his preface to the new dictionary on cultural literacy, What Every American Needs to Know, Hirsch expands on this concept. Community is the built-up of shared knowledge and values, the same shared knowledge that is taken for granted when we read a book or a newspaper, that is also taken for granted as part of the fabric that connects us to one another. Traditional fairy tales are included in that fabric. In addition, their values and their heroes can give a map and compass to our children for life. As G.K. Chesterton wrote, and I love this quote, I've included it on this show before, and I'm glad it's the last thing that we can read before we call up Stephen Jonathan Rummelsberg. From G.K. Chesterton, quote, fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey, like the bogeyman, fear. What fairy tales give the child is his first clear idea of the possible defeat of bogey. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he first had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon, end quote. And I think that is so great because where are our St. Georges? Where are our dragons? I mean, we've been encouraged so long now to try to reason with and understand the villain. So who knows where we go from here? But